it's Louise Ward here, and this is Made in New Zealand, where we talk to Kiwi musicians, artists, writers. Today we have Jacqui Thomas with us, and it is our huge pleasure to talk to Jacqui about her book, Her Way, Doing Business with Heart, New Zealand Female Business Founders Doing Good as Well as Doing Well. Leading the way in a post-COVID world, which we'll get onto in a minute, I think, about the post-COVID thing. But first of all, Jacqui, who are you? Tell us about yourself.
Who am I? Well, thanks, Lou, for having me here for a start. Who am I? I am a businesswoman. I've got my own business as well, and work with a lot of businesses. So I'm a business coach and I do consulting. But I guess who I am is really passionate about doing business with heart in a way that where you can look out for other people, you can look out for the planet, you can do it in a way that's win-win and still be successful in business. Mm.
And so what the book, if we can just have a look at Her Way, is rather a beautiful book. Yes, we'll show that to the camera. Absolutely, we will. So what's the inspiration behind Her Way?
There's a couple of prongs to that, actually. I had initially written another book called Gilgo, which came out in 2001, so, sort of right at the turn of the century, really, which that book was really well received, and that was a collection of stories of women in business as well, a similar format to this one. And I guess I've been having a lot of comments over the years of when was I going to write another book about women in business again, and I was kind of thinking, well, is that really necessary in 2020 to be devoting a book to stories about women in business? Isn't it just a thing where it's just accepted now that women can do business? Maybe it's not really a thing. Maybe it's a bit trite to be sort of creating a book about that. But the more I thought about it, and I looked at my own bookshelf, which has got lots of fabulous books about men in business that are either written by men or about men, which are all useful in their own right, and I've certainly learned from them and enjoyed them. But I'm thinking, where are all the stories about the women? They're out there doing cool things as well. So I thought, well, maybe it is worth doing another collection of women's stories. And then the second prong of it really is that I really wanted to explore the belief that I have that it is possible to do business successfully in a more feminine style. And when I say feminine, I just really mean those sort of softer qualities which we've come to sort of associate as feminine qualities. Things like caring and sharing and nurturing and communicating and looking out for other people and treating them well and paying them well, being mindful of the planet, all of those sorts of things that I think women often naturally bring into the business realm, and just wanting to explore whether it is actually possible to do business in that way and still have a successful business, but without needing to be so cutthroat and competitive. So that's kind of the lens that these stories are all sort of viewed through. And then I guess thirdly, also just exploring whether there are still common challenges that women in business are still facing in this day and age, which you would think maybe not, but there are still some common themes coming through that are sort of challenges that are still needing to be addressed.
And what are they? Let's explore that for a moment.
Sure. Well, a big one is finance, funding women-led business ventures, and so that was a common theme throughout these women that I interviewed. Not all experienced the challenge. There was the odd woman I came across who said that actually it worked in their favour, but it is sort of well documented and well researched. There's not scientific evidence, but studies have been done that show that women-led businesses aren't getting the venture capital or the funding the same as male-led businesses
are. Is there a why to that? Is there a reason for that? Apart from just plain sexism?
Well, it's hard to say. And a lot of if you talk to like the venture capital companies, they'll say, well, it's because women aren't pitching, but they are. It's because women aren't doing as well, but they are. It's because women that don't want the money, well, they do. This is starting to be turned around now because... And to be fair, some of the women in the book that I asked this question to said that actually it's worked in their favour, because when they've been seeking capital, they have been able to source funding almost based on the fact that those people were looking to get more woman-led companies on their books to sort of rectify the sort of imbalance. So it's certainly not that every woman's saying this, but many women are. And if you read the book, one of the women, Sudabev from Beanie, it talks a lot about this and the sort of struggles that she found. And also, through that, she is sort of looking to address that challenge. There's also Teresa Gatting in the book, who has there's the female lead for Shiyo, which is kind of an organisation that's come out of Canada and is now in New Zealand, and that's all about supporting woman-led, woman-owned businesses that are doing good as well as doing well, and basically ventures through that can get an interest-free business loan. So there's a lot to that. So that's talked about throughout the book, and other sort of innovative ways and means around this problem are also being addressed. So for the likes of Pledge Me, for example, Anna Gunter, who's one of the founders of Pledge Me, is in the book also. So that's also looking to address this imbalance by providing other means of funding for people that wouldn't normally be able to access sort of normal channels of funding. So that's crowdfunding, basically.
Yeah. I think there is a sense at the moment that we don't have to abide by the rules because the rules are just made up rules, as all rules are, and so we can start to create our own set of rules, perhaps.
Yes, and that comes through in a lot of the stories of in this book. Whether it be environmental things or how much you pay people, or all sorts of things that women are saying, well, I don't want to do it this way, so I'm going to try this way. Yeah. And hopefully it works.
Yeah, I think we can see, because I've got so many questions buzzing in my head. I want to go back in a minute to what's changed since 2001, since you wrote Go, 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 Go. But we are seeing a refocus, particularly in New Zealand, of the doing good whilst doing well type thing. There are lots of success stories in the media. And so we do have a female leader, quite a world-famous female leader. Are we seeing a shift towards the kindness aspect and what's good for the people versus just the economy? Of course, the economy needs to thrive.
Well, I think with the lovely Jacinda, we're seeing that brought to the fore. So I think it's a lot more obvious. I think in the business world, I've certainly been seeing this and believing this for quite some time, but I think it's actually sort of now being seen sort of more in the limelight. And it is, thanks to the likes of Jacinda. She's obviously the classic and stunning role model for this globally. That we're seeing that actually compassion and kindness doesn't need to mean weakness. Yeah. So there is strength in compassion and kindness, and she's a fabulous example of how you can get things done, and it's not all candy floss and kittens, but while still being compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that aspect to the book as well. So inherently feminine, and you've put it in quote marks there, attributes: sharing, caring, collaborating, nurturing, helping. So I know that you're not of the philosophy that it's a male versus female world at all. Yeah. So how can we, because I'm a small business owner also, how can we bring these more caring qualities into our business, and how do they sort of butt heads a little bit with the aggressive businessman philosophy?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, for me, business comes down to people, really. Whereas I think traditionally business has been about the spreadsheet, and that might be a very simplistic view of it. But for me, I think that's what it comes down to. And so then for me, because business is about people, it's more about heart. Whereas traditionally it's all been about money, and therefore it's all been about head. And I do believe you need both. I'm not saying that it's all sort of candy floss and kittens and kumbaya. I mean, the business still has to be commercially viable and it still has to stack up. The numbers are still important. But I think you can have both. And by bringing a bit of heart in, it's actually usually better for the bottom line. It's actually better for that spreadsheet. And it's certainly better for the people that are involved in it, whether that's your clients and your customers or your team.
Yeah.
But also for the environment, like looking at the sustainability factor and actually just being a bit more mindful about how you're utilising resources and what you're doing to give back and that sort of thing. And it's just a much better long-term view, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So since 2001, that's 19 years ago now.
I know,
which
right.
when I did the math, I thought, no, 2001's only yesterday, surely. But what are the challenges? How have things improved?
Well, it's really tricky to say a little bit because I was obviously a different person 20 years ago when I was... so the Go Gilgo 20 years ago was very much the book that I needed then as somebody who was starting out in business and really didn't have a clue. Like I knew how to do what it was that I was doing, which was essentially sort of freelance writing and communications, that sort of thing. But I had no idea about the business side of it. So I guess I was interviewing women with a view to find out what I needed to know and then sharing that information with other people as well. So now I guess when I'm interviewing these women, I'm interviewing them through a different lens. So it's not so much about the, how did you do it and how did you work out your pricing and how do you do your marketing. It was sort of a bit more about, tell me about your journey, and what sort of things are important to you, about the values and the purpose of your business and, how do you find bringing those values and purpose into the commercial side of your business, those sorts of things. So I guess I was just maybe asking different questions, exploring things at perhaps a deeper level. And having said all of that, even if you weren't a business person, you'd find this book really interesting, even if you just like reading interesting stories.
Yeah,
so
people stories.
At face value, this is a collection of stories of interesting people doing cool things.
I'd like to get onto the people. But first, just something that popped into my head was, do you think that women measure success differently to men?
I encourage everybody to measure success in their own unique way, because I think that's of more value. In fact, I've actually dedicated this book to my daughter, and I wrote in the dedication for her to hopefully, choose her own authentic measuring stick for success.
Yeah.
And, use that as your measure. So I think with anybody, whether male or female, when you've got a values-based business or a business that's driven by a purpose, then that becomes your measuring stick. And actually, interestingly, over COVID, when I look at some of the businesses that sort of closed their doors within a week, they tended to be the businesses that were driven solely by the spreadsheet, not the ones that were led by purpose or a passion.
Yeah, they're missing a trick.
Yeah, so...
missing something essential.
I've forgotten exactly what your question was, but so I've managed to sort of talk all around it probably. But
it's just about measurements of success, and I think, our philosophy in Wardini Books has always been people over profit, people before profit. Yeah. And certainly when we were recruiting, it was like, are you passionate about books? Are you a big reader? Yes, great, tick. Yeah. Are you a kind person? Yeah. And those are really the two. Everything else I can teach you. I can teach you how to use the computer. I can teach you how to scan a book. Yeah. But those are the two essentials, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's, when I say that to me, business comes down to people. That's exactly what it's about. And, you'll see kindness come up as an important theme through many of the stories in this book that, for several of the businesses, one of their core values is kindness for exactly the same reasons that you've just said, and they're not interested in business partners or investors or even suppliers and even customers and clients sometimes that are not prepared to adhere to that value.
I love that. So let's get on to these women. It's a really good diverse mix of all sorts of kinds of women and businesses. So just pick some bits out, and perhaps the bits what really surprised you while you were researching.
I was just going to say, you're not going to ask me to pick favourites.
Gosh, no. We will not play favourites.
Well, I mean, when I was choosing the woman, I guess I was, like I say, looking for interesting women who've had interesting journeys. So, none of them, it's not just a sort of an airbrushed profile piece of rah, 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 I did this and it was great. It's very much these women have been prepared to share quite openly and candidly their journeys, the ups, the downs, some of their background. And I was also looking to try and get a really diverse mix that really sort of spoke to New Zealand, which, is such a diverse population now. So I really tried to find women in businesses that covered the length of the country. So from Auckland to Queenstown, at least, is where we've managed to source women from, and trying to cover a range of ages. So we've got everything from sort of straight out of university to woman with a gold card. So,
great.
And everything in between. Also trying to get that sort of ethnic diversity, which, is always interesting. So, I mean, all of these women would identify, I think, as Kiwi, New Zealanders. But we've managed to, get some lovely Māori women, Pacifica, Asian, sort of, Indian and Chinese, a couple of women that have immigrated from England, either as adults or who came out here with their parents when they were children. So just really trying to get, and also a mix of different types of businesses and different sectors as well.
So a reflection of the face of New Zealand.
Well, trying to as much as possible, and it's not always easy, but whilst still having, genuinely interesting stories and women that are prepared to share openly, because, they needed to be able to be comfortable to talk to me.
So how do you apart from, using the internet, I suppose, how do you find these really fascinating people?
Fascinating women are everywhere.
I know, but how did you narrow it down then?
Well, I started with just my own sort of, woman I'd heard about, or woman I'd seen pop up in other places, a bit of sort of Googling and research, and then often one person will lead to another person, or then you start, it's kind of like that sort of thing, like when you're going to buy a car and you start looking at cars and then you start seeing those cars everywhere. Yep. It's like that. I think your radar is then sort of attuned to the fact that this is what I'm looking out for, and then they start popping up, or you hear somebody talking about somebody, or, and then it's just a matter of approaching them, really. And I think that is one of the things about women, is that typically speaking, and it's a generalisation, that often, women are very happy to share. They're very happy to talk to you and share their experiences. And, these women have all been incredibly open and candid with me. And when you read their stories, some of the things you share, some of the things you read that they've shared, you'll be astounded at how much, like just the generosity of their sharing and how vulnerable they've allowed themselves to be. Yeah. Which, are really grateful for that, and, have a huge amount of respect to them for that, and really trust that their stories will be received as they've been shared, which was, very generously.
That's great to see that. I think we are breaking down barriers as people, aren't we? There's all sorts of podcasts and books and things coming out of people sharing their stories, and say it's okay to say, I really struggled with this. It's okay. You can say that, and you can still go on and be a successful person.
Absolutely.
But what were your wow moments? Did anything pop into your head?
I'm just realising that I probably didn't answer your question before at all. I just waffled on about something else.
We're just rolling.
Wow moments. Oh, gosh, there's so many. And I think probably for every woman in the book there's a wow moment, and that's probably why they made it to the book. I interviewed more people than are in the book, and it got to the point where, unfortunately I had to sort of reduce the number down that could fit in the book, which, so there are also some fabulous stories out there that aren't in the book, sadly, and I'm very sorry to those women. But wow moments, I mean, I'm just trying to think of a good example. Okay, so Brianne West from Atik, I mean, she's wow, and she's her business, Atik, is basically beauty bars. So her whole premise was that she wanted to reduce plastic waste in the beauty industry, and she was studying science at university. So she basically had the premise that basically all these cosmetics are made up largely of water, and if you took the water out, then you wouldn't need the plastic container. So she's basically created her whole business around wanting to reduce plastic waste on the planet, and around this premise that if you take the water out of cosmetic products, then you don't need the plastic. And she's saved, millions of plastic bottles so far. I think last I heard it was 9 million plastic bottles that she had prevented from being produced.
Person.
Well, she's a great
One
team
business.
now. With
Absolutely, but one person's idea.
Vision.
Yeah.
With a fabulous
9 million.
team around her now, and it's a global brand. Her products are available across the world.
So that gives truth, doesn't it, to when people have that, what can I do as one person? I'm putting my recycling in my thing. But if one person can have that effect, 9 million plastic bottles, that's incredible.
And not everybody's going to be able to have that sort of effect. But, I think, one person can always do something small anyway.
Yeah, and we can aspire.
And cumulatively, it all makes a difference. But, the Brianne Wests of this world, are stubborn enough and curious enough, I think, to create something or try something and just give it a whirl.
That's very inspiring. So just to finish off, we've got a few minutes left. What have you learned, Jacqui, from this process?
I always, it's such a privilege just even getting to talk to these women. So I learned something from each and every one of them. That's to me the best part of the process. The actual sort of then having to write the book and produce the book and sell the book, that's all interesting in its own way, but it's really that first up, that getting to meet these women. It's, an honour and a privilege, and getting to get inside them a little bit and have, and then just that, I guess that, I use the word privilege again, that they are actually allowing me to take their words, turn it into a story, still endeavouring to keep their own voice, keeping it as authentic as possible, but then to share it as widely as I can. So, I have to be really respectful of that.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
Well, it is, and I always go back with the stories to the women, and they've all, had a chance to, read them and make sure that they're happy with them before they go to print. But I guess I'm just the conduit really in between these fabulous women and their stories and getting them to a wider audience, which is fabulous.
Speaking of the audience, in our final minute or two, so who's going to read this book? Me as a bookseller, who am I giving it to?
It could be for budding entrepreneurs. It could be for people that are already sort of working in business. Maybe working for somebody else's business. Anybody who's interested in business is definitely going to find value in this book. But it's also for that sort of that armchair enthusiast who might not be remotely interested in starting a business of their own, but just enjoys reading about interesting people's lives. And I guess the beauty of the book as well is that it is a collection of stories, so you can pick and choose. You can think, I feel like reading that one today, and then I might go back to the beginning and read that one back there. So you can dip in and out of it, and you don't have to read it cover to cover in one sitting necessarily.
I think there's a lot of learning in there for all of us, irrespective of age, gender, race, etc. I think there'll be lots of things for us to pick out.
Absolutely,
there.
And I guess I just want to stress that again, that it's definitely not a male versus female thing. Men reading these stories will find them just as interesting. Well, perhaps
they should do.
But certainly business people. It's not that this is girls versus boys or anything like that. It's just that actually
a gentle nudge that there is another way.
Yeah, and there's men using these qualities in the business realm these days as well. So it's just that I've chosen to write about women.
Yeah, why ever not? Well, thank you. Yeah. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for our listeners out there, you've been listening to Made in New Zealand on Radio Kidnappers, the voice of Hawke's Bay.